Hi, this is Everett's Watercolors. Welcome to my classroom. Now today I'm going to show a way of doing a colorful background. Now everyone knows the colors of the rainbow. I'm going to use those colors, but I'm going to use them in a couple different ways and not necessarily in the same order. And then I'm going to demonstrate how you can use those colors to create a background to be used in 3 unique, beautiful greeting cards. Now these colorful backgrounds can be used for several items, landscapes, foregrounds, background colors, even a nice sunrise. So there's an unlimited number of ways to use a nice colorful background. So let's go to my painting table and I will show you the process of how I made these beautiful, colorful backgrounds. This is a 1-inch natural hair brush. And I've got my paints already wetted up. I got my palette ready to go. I got wetted up the paint I'm going to use. I'm using the colors of the rainbow. Yellow, green, blue, purple, red, and orange. But I'm going to put them in a different pattern. And I'm going to start out with a small piece of paper. And the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to use a large, this is a 2.5-inch or 3-inch wash brush. I'm going to wet it up. I'm going to wet the paper on this first. I'm going to do 2 cards today, or 2 paintings. And I'll wet the paper first, get it nice and wet. And I'll take out the extra moisture here. And even out the water on the paper. Okay, so this first one is going to be a wet on wet technique. I'm going to start out with lemon yellow. With a 1-inch brush, and I'm gonna start here in the middle. I'm gonna put the yellow right across the middle, and because the paper is wet, the paint's going to spread. And because it's wet, I'm going to add a little bit more pigment, because that way, with the extra water on the paper, is also going to lighten the color. So I want to put a little more paint, a little more pigment, with that extra water on the paper. Now rinse out the brush. Use the sponge to get it clean. Then I'm going to go to the next color, which is orange. My permanent orange. And I'm going to overlap the yellow and start with the orange. Again, I'm going to add a little more pigment because it's wet paper. Now rinse out the brush. Then I'm going to go into the pyro red. This is a very bright red. It's another color in the rainbow spectrum. Overlap the orange. And you see with the overlapping of the colors, they also make a soft edge between each color. Now also I'm going to look at what's happening here. I'm going to go back and pick up a little more orange and go back and introduce that one more time. And every time we do this, you're going to get a different result. Now I'll go back and put a little more yellow on top of that. Again, I'm redoing the colors because I want them to, because of the wet paper, it's going to spread and give me a nice graded wash. Now the next color next to the yellow would come the green number 1. I rinse out the brush, make sure it's nice and clean. And then green number 1, again, I'm going to overlap the yellow. And I'll get that soft edge, and I'll pick up a little more because it's got water. Remember, because I had water on the paper, I'm going to put another layer of color on top of that. And then the last color is going to be cobalt blue. I'll mix a little bit of blue, which is already wet. I really like what's going on. The paint is spreading very nicely. A little more paint. Now watching the gradation here. Again, this paint, I'm going to add a little more because the extra water on the paper is going to lighten it up. I'll come in, put a little more pigment in there. Okay, now that's all wet, so what I'm going to do is lay this aside. So very carefully move it over, and what I'll do is I'll put it on a piece of paper towel and let it dry. Now I'll move that aside because I'm going to work on another small painting. I'll wipe up the paint here on my workspace. Okay, now this one is another, again, the same size paper. It's about 5 by 6 inch size, 5 inch by 6 inch size. So what I've done, I'm going to use the same colors. I'm going to use the rainbow colors. I'm going to use the red, the orange, the yellow, use the green, the blue, and I forgot the violet. You know what I'll do? I'll leave that alone because I'll do that on the next card. Okay, this one's going to be wet on dry, which means a wet paint on a dry paper. So this is watercolor paper, 140 pound, little piece of 5 by inch stock. So I'm going to start with the yellow first. It's usually a good idea to start with a lighter color because I'm going to be working darker colors as I move down. So I'm going to start with the permanent yellow lemon. Now I'm going to start at the top of the paper this time. I'm going to start here, and this is dry paper. So as I go across, I'll get a hard edge. I'll get a hard edge. Again, I'll introduce some more pigment. I want a nice bright color. Now the next color in sequence would be the orange, permanent orange. Again, picking up a nice. I'm going to overlap again, so I get a soft edge between the colors. And I'll pick up a little more pigment. Make sure I get a nice bright color mix. And because the paints is wet, I mean they're going to get a nice soft edge in between the bands. And my next color is going to be red. So I'm going to have a little bit of pyro red. Now this is artist quality paint. You can use almost any paint you want to make a small painting. But my palette has artist quality paints in it. That's a very vibrant red. Wow, is that strong? Okay, make a nice presentation. Okay, the next color in sequence will be violet. And here I have quinacridone violet, which is a beautiful color. A mixture of blue and red gives you that violet, but this is one. It's in my palette. So this is quinacridone violet, right after the red. Isn't that beautiful? A beautiful color. And it blends very nicely with the red. I'll pick up a little more. This will be a real strong mix. That happens to be one of my favorite colors. I like quinacridone violet. Okay, now after the violet, I'm going to pick up the cobalt blue. I'll pick up the cobalt blue again, a nice strong mix. Because I'm working on dry paper, I'm going to use a little bit more pigment, make it nice and again overlap so that they blend. I get a soft edge. And I'll put a little more pigment there so it's a little bit stronger blue. And working this way with a wet brush, wet paint on dry paper gives you a soft edge in between the colors. And the last color is going to be green. So wash out the brush. Wash out the brush between each color change. I'm using one brush, so each color change I have to clean out the brush real good. So I go into my cleaning water and rinse out the brush. There's a line there because as you notice, sometimes in this case here the blue dried a little. It's you know, it depends on the humidity and the temperature change and everything. So what I'm going to do is introduce that blue again over top of that green to get a nice soft edge, and then I'll pick up a little more of that green. So you have to work with the paint. You have to work with the mixtures and so forth. Okay, so that one there was completed as a wet paint on top of a dry piece of paper. Now there are lots of interesting things we can do with the results of this, and the one thing I want to show you, show you examples here of some cards that can be made from this. This first card was made with the same sort of color scheme: the yellow, orange, red, the purple, the blue, and the green. But this one, my wife she makes greeting cards and uses stamps, and these stamps came from Gina K Designs, which is a very nice company, and they have a lot of interesting, nice stamps. But this one here, this is something different. This was what my wife did. What Gloria did was she cut this portion off and actually made two cards. She made a card here on this particular size, and then the remnants she made a stripe or a strip and made another card out of it. So out of one painting, she made two cards. And I think they really turned out beautiful, and the stamp really shows it off. Now also you'll notice there's a little bit of texture in here, and I can show you that when this gets. I'm watching the paints right now, and here's another one. This is the one where you start with the red, the orange, yellow, and then the green, blue, and the violet. And this is another stamp that was done. So this is another card made out of the same process. So by making a small little design, using the rainbow colors, and then using the stamps, you can make up a nice set of cards. This one here now, we'll look at this one here I did, this was the wet on wet. And it's still a little bit damp. But what I do, I'm looking for the shine. When the shine goes away. So what I'll do here now is I'll take a dot spray bottle. This is the Palette in a Bottle dot sprayer. Just plain water. And what I can do here is when the painting is still damp. Now it's not dry. You wait till it gets to a point where the shine goes away, which means it's almost dry. And then you can go in and very light tap and put in little patterns of dots. And what they'll do then, they'll come out with that texture. If you remember this card here, all those little marks back here were done with a spray bottle. And see how the interesting background you get from that? Makes another interesting detail. The spray bottles, and of course all my paints and equipment available on Everest Watercolors. Everest Watercolors, everestwatercolors.com. That's where you can find my supplies, spray bottles, paints, and brushes, and so forth. And let me look at this other card. This one's still damp, but I'm going to try the same technique over here. So let me put this one down, bring this one over. I'm going to try to put, use a dot spray bottle, and some of it's a little bit wet, some of it's dry, but I'm just going to try it out. Again, this is experimental. Just a light tap Now everything I do in my classroom is experimental. I try different techniques, not the same thing every time. I try different ways. So this will show a little bit of how the dots are formed, and then also the drying process, because some of it's on dry, which doesn't show up on dry section, but the wet section, it does show a little bit. But on the section that just starts to dry, you can see some of the dots starting to form. Okay, and you wait for that to dry, and then you get that little pattern. I think down here in the green, you can really see it happening down here on the green. You can really see the marks starting to show up. Now again, that'll give you a very interesting background on your paper. Now this is good for regular paintings, landscapes, still lifes, whatever. If you want to get a little texture in your painting, in this case we're making little sample sections here. So here's what we did today. This one here was done wet on wet, which was wet the paper first, then I put the paint down on top of the wet paper, and then when it started to dry, then I sprayed in some dot sprays here to get the after effect of what happens. Over here was wet on dry, but I blended the colors. No, I got these backwards. This one's wet on wet over here. This was wet first because I forgot the purple. Anyway, this was wet on wet, and you can see how the paint really starts to spread here. And that's an interesting effect too. Sometimes the paint will spread, and your results come out different than you expected, but that's fine. Doesn't have to be perfect. Then over here I did wet on dry. We're going to dry paper, and here I did the soft edges when I overlapped the paint on top of each other. Okay, but it gives you an interesting effect, and you remember the results of the greeting cards. Once you put the stamp on there and move it around and put different design on top of that, then you have a finished product. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and give me a thumbs up. It helps in my ratings. Join the Facebook group Fun with Watercolors, where you can post any art or techniques that you learned from any of my videos. Thank you for watching. See you on the next video.